Hello, dear colleagues. My name is Yakovenko Oleg, a practicing dental technician, specialization ceramics, a teacher of the training center of the company Stamil. I am a consultant for the entire line of products for dental technicians which are produced by the company JenDental Ukraine. Today we start a series of training videos dedicated to the peculiarities of working with Ultropaline ceramics. In the system of ceramics Ultropaline, there is a large technical coloring on which we can see most of the components of ceramics, such as opaque dentin, dentin, standard enamels, intensity modifiers, and conditionally transparent opal masses. In addition, we can see cervical vestibular masses and colorants. To date, some of the components have not been included in the coloring, such as mamelon masses and crystal opaque. Today we will be making crowns on the 24th and 25th teeth, and the fabrication itself will naturally be divided into 6 stages. Let's start with the first opaque. You can use bonded opaque instead of the first opaque. We start with the powdered opaque. We prepare it to a sour cream-like consistency and use a glass rod with a thin, rounded end to cover the entire surface of the crown, except for the garland. As we can see, powder opaque has a superb covering power, but only if we dilute it exclusively with opaque liquid. Cover all surfaces that will be coated with ceramics. Lightly condense the opaque. The paste opaque is also present in the ultrapaline ceramic system. We dilute it with glaze liquid. We do not apply it with a glass shelf, but with a synthetic brush. With the tip of the brush, we cover all the surfaces that will be coated with ceramics with a thin layer in the same way. Slightly condensed, and cover the end. The crown, which was covered with powder opaque, needed to be covered a second time to completely cover, mask the color of the metal. Cover the crown, coated with paste opaque. In the same way, we apply a second layer of paste. Lightly condense. Cover uncovered surfaces with the remaining portion. And now, on top of the opaque paste, we sprinkle crystal opaque granules. Crystal opaque acts like opaque dentin and absorbs the light reflected from the opaque. The crowns with the opaque we place in the furnace for subsequent firing on the appropriate programs. At this stage, we cover the crown coated with powdered opaque with a thin layer of opaque dentin. This is done to reduce light reflection from the opaque layer and thereby create a uniform crown color over the entire length of the crown, moreover, including the thin areas. In the area of the chewing surface, in the place of future fissures, we place a small amount of material, dentin modifier ochre, which will shine through the dentin and enamel of the finished crown. Our task is not to create a mold at this stage. Our task is solely to cover the opaque. We do not do opaque dentin on the neighboring tooth because we have already covered it with crystal opaque, which, as you can remember, also acts as opaque dentin. We place the product in the oven. At this stage, we will deal with already creating the shape of the tooth with dentin, enamel, transparencies and other components of the mass. I use the technique of natural segmentation, that is starting from the neck with the central segment and then, as if creating side segments, lengthening the central segment. I control the position of the teeth in the arch and, of course, the star positions. And naturally, I immediately apply dentin to the natural shape of the future tooth and slightly create a place on the enamel. The vestibular surface of the crowns is formed. I slightly condense the mass and move on to the chewing surface. We form the vestibular tuberosity. And then with dentin, we form the proximal ramps of the tooth. The mass, as we can see, is very plastic and pliable. Allows you to create all the nuances of the form. We work with the tip of the brush. Maybe you've noticed that I use column brushes. We begin to create the oral tubercles. And close the oral surface. After we have created the dentin surface, we dry the mess a little and return to the vestibular surface. We make vertical slits, which will serve as a shadow zone in the future. We put the slits with transparent mass, in this case with super transparent. After laying the transparent, we'll level the surface of the crown. Lightly condense and proceed to the creation of mamelon tips. We lengthen the formed dentin tip with mamelon matte. Mamelon masses are brighter and more opaque compared to dentin. Therefore, the crowns will be accentuated. We cover the places where the mamelons start. With a thin layer of dentin to give the impression that the mamelons grow from the dip within the dentin. In the proximal areas, we again place a transparent mass to increase the transparency of the crown in the proximal areas. One of the crowns will be baked without enamel, and the second crown will be covered with enamel to the desired size. We start with the lateral segment. Place the second lateral segment. Create the transition to the proximal side and place the central segment. Do not stop monitoring the position of the crown at the dental arch. If necessary, with small portions of mess or opalescence, we lengthen the wing of the tooth to our desired length. Lightly condense. Move onto the chewing surface. On the chewing surface, we start the same way, with the formation of the proximal slopes of the enamel. Lightly emphasize the transverse fissure. Form the vestibular tubercle on the young ones. We we proceed to the formation of the oral tubercle. And with the tip of the brush, we spread and disperse the mass in the places. Close the oral surface. Accentuate the fissures. Make the crown from 10 to 15% longer than the neighboring teeth, taking into account the future shrinkage of the ceramic. Dry. Now with a fine needle, along the lines of the future fissures, we scratch the first layer of ceramic in order to create a controlled shrinkage. Use a thin blade to separate our crowns one from another. Remove the excess ceramic. We place the piece in the oven. At this stage, we correct the shape of the crown and bring the ceramic mass to those places where it was uncomfortable for us to work on the model. Firstly, this applies to the neck zone and, of course, the proximal zones, which were not accessible on the model. We start the additions from the dentin, just as we did in the first burning. We close the cervical zone, remove excess dentin, and slightly condense. Place a small amount of ochre dentin modifier into the gaps on the chewing surface in the same way as we used in the opaque dentin stage. We continue the correction with enamel masses. At this stage, you can work with transparent, but carefully so that the crown does not look too glassy. If necessary, lengthen the incisal edge. Send the product to the oven. After grinding the crown, we proceed to the last stage, application of glaze and colorants. Glaze in the mass of ultropaline is available in powdered form and in the paste. And also remember, dilute the glaze only with glaze liquid. This is super important to understand and remember. This applies to both the paste glaze and powdered glaze. Cover the entire surface of the crown with a thin layer of glaze. Remove excess glaze with a brush from the chewing surface. Place a small amount of bright colorant in the fissures. Paint the fissures and shade them with colorants. Underpaint the neck a little thicker in the proximal areas, a little less in the central area. The work is placed in the oven for burning on the appropriate programs.